9 out of 10 times, they have racist leanings. And you don't have to be a raving racist to be a racist. Some of the most racist people I have ever known are Caucasian Baptist pastors. Some of the most racist people I've ever met are trad wives or women who try to uphold the traditional family dynamic. Because when you believe that everyone has a role that they were created to fill, that is the creation of racism, sexism, and homophobia. Because if you don't fit in those divine created roles, you are a danger and a threat to decent, God-fearing people. Of course, the people most likely to be arrested for hurting children are people who are in conservative environments. You Google how many pastors and Christian music icons have been arrested recently for touching children or misconduct against women or young teenage girls. In my opinion, when I think of someone who targets children, the first thing I think of is a white, conservative man. And that's not being sexist or racist. That assumption is backed up with statistics and data by law enforcement. That's not to say that every white conservative man is a bad racist or predator. Of course not. But it does seem to consistently prove every time. I would say 99 out of 100 arrests, it's a conservative or a white male. If he's not conservative, he probably has some kind of faith, even if it's undecided. 2/3 of people in this country are religious. Whether or not they practice, who knows? Very few people in prison are atheists. That should tell you something about racism. And it's not going away anytime soon. Under Trump, they're no longer hiding their racism. And I've heard that they've added at least 5 more hate groups to the list of the hate groups of America. Racist and sexist group membership have gone up 25% by February of this year. And it's not going to change as long as we have white supremacy groups, people who want to return to the American Confederacy. I mean, we should want nothing to do with the Confederacy. The only time we should even dwell or show Confederacy in any fashion is to show the evils of American history. People who display the Confederate flag, why would anybody, unless you're trying to teach the evils of racism in American history, why would anyone want to display a flag that caused the death and enslavement of millions of African American and minorities? You cannot convince me that someone who doesn't display the Confederate flag is not a racist. Because anyone who holds a flag in such high esteem, that is a symbol of slavery and human rights violations. How can you not be a racist? And even if you're not a raging racist, nobody who understands American history and has empathy toward people who were wronged before, during, and after the Civil War would want to display such a racist, white supremacist symbol of oppression. Society needs to shame people who want to display racist things. racist language. People should be shamed by society for using racial slurs. And everyone just needs to stop using racial slurs, even people within their own community. Stop using racial slurs. The problem with America is America was started, built, and has stood around this long because of our racism. And it's everywhere. And it's backed by every Christian church that adheres to biblical accuracy. Because if the book that symbolizes your religion never condemned slavery and actually told people how to legally and morally conduct themselves in slavery, doing slavery things, should tell you that this religion is evil. And anyone who's a part of a religion whose book never condemns slavery, but supports it and sets up rules how to continue doing it, is enabling racism and is saying this is okay. But nobody calls it out, not consistently. If the majority of Americans condemned the racism and sexism of the MAGA and the patriotic supporters of Trump, he would never have been elected. If we had held him accountable for his misconduct against women, his illegal behavior, his flippant disrespect for laws in our country, if people actually had a backbone and opposed a felon and a sexual predator by being even nominated for a candidacy, Trump would not have been anywhere near the White House. And institutions that support someone like Trump should be called out and avoided immediately. Any institution that supports the candidacy and presidency of a racist, sexist, sexual predator, multiple felon, a liar, do not be a member of these groups. Avoid them. Call them out. And anyone who stays in these environments is enabling this behavior. They're basically signing a petition that says, I agree with everything that's been done, what they're doing, and what they will do in the future. Racism is not going anywhere because the people with privilege, who are usually white, don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't want to teach their kids or let their kids be taught the realities of what being white means. They don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't want to have to take accountability and be the one that changes the way their race and the way their group of people reacts to inhuman history events. And there are a dozen states that made it illegal to even teach how racism has affected American history. Politics, food prices, healthcare, access to reproductive assistance. If you go to the doctor, if you're African American, you wait longer than any white person ever will. It takes longer to be diagnosed, and you have a higher chance of dying before you're diagnosed or given care because you're not white. And you have a higher chance of being medically gaslit due to your race. The states where critical race theory is banned by law for educators. Let's take a look at the different states. Alabama bans critical race theory. Alaska has considered a ban, but it is not yet banned. Arizona has banned critical race theory. Arkansas has banned it. California has never considered or passed any banning. There is no restriction. Colorado, they've considered a ban. No ban has ever been implemented. Connecticut, just like California, no restriction, and they have not tried any restrictions. Delaware, no restriction. Florida, considering a ban. I'm actually surprised about that one. I thought they would have a ban. Georgia, banned. Hawaii, no restriction. Idaho has banned critical race theory. Illinois, considered a ban. Indiana, ban failed to pass. So that means that there was enough to consider. Iowa, banned. Kansas, considered a ban. Kentucky, considered a ban. Louisiana, considered a ban. Maine, the ban failed to pass. Maryland, considered a ban. Massachusetts, no restriction. Michigan, considered a ban. Now this is kind of interesting because Michigan was voted last year as the most friendly state to gays and queers. Minnesota, considered a ban. Mississippi, it's banned. Missouri, considering a ban. Montana, banned. Nebraska, considering a ban. Nevada, no restriction. New Hampshire, banned. New Jersey, considered a ban. New Mexico, considering a ban. New York, considering a ban. North Carolina, ban failed to pass. North Dakota, banned. Ohio, considered a ban. Oklahoma, banned. Oregon, no restriction. Pennsylvania, considered a ban. Rhode Island, ban failed to pass. South Carolina, considered a ban. South Dakota, banned. Tennessee, banned. Texas, banned. Utah, banned. Vermont, no restriction. Virginia, banned. Washington, considering a ban. West Virginia, considering a ban. Wisconsin, ban failed to pass. Wyoming, ban failed to pass. Now, I'm surprised about that. So you see, I would say less than 10 states have never tried to pass a ban, or it's not on record. Any state that has tried to pass a ban, or a ban that has been implemented, is a state with extremely high racism. Any state, institution, or region that doesn't want kids to understand how race impacts quality of life, history, living location, politics, social interaction, legal due process. It's trying to erase racism. White people who don't want their kids to experience how racism harms people is trying to erase and forget how many people who weren't white were victimized, harmed, or died. How many symbols of different advocacy groups are white? How many how many victims of crime are white? If your child is taken, white people have the highest stats of your child being returned safe without harm. If the child that goes missing is not ethnically white, you get fewer. You don't have as much media attention. There isn't as many people looking. And your child is probably not going to be on the front page. If you're African American, Hispanic, Asian, your odds of getting your child back have dropped 20% just because of your race. The term missing white woman syndrome. How many characters in movies that went missing or died were white? If you don't teach kids that your race basically helps or hinders you, how will they ever understand history? Regardless of how of a decent person someone is, no matter how much education they get, they will always make 85 cents less. Well, let's see, they'll always make 15 cents less an hour because they're African, even if they're a man. If you're a woman, you make a quarter less, 25 cents less than a white man, regardless if you have more education or degrees than he has. Anyone who does not want their kids to learn about how racism affects quality of life, access to health care, your ability to recover from massive trauma or an illness, if you go missing, you have a 15 to 20% less chance of being found alive and safe, less media coverage. You have really no chance of ever being chosen as a symbol of a hate crime. You look at the symbol of gay hate crimes. It's a white person. Do you honestly believe people like John Benet Ramsey or Elizabeth Short would be as famous as they are if they hadn't been white? People like Matthew Shepard, do you honestly believe they would be famous or what happened to them be as infamous in American history if they hadn't been white? Name one person who is held as a symbol of some form of hate crime that isn't white. The only exception is if it's a racism. If it's a white on African American crime. Very few laws are ever induced into legislation that didn't happen to a white person. And it's always like that. You watch movies. The first people that usually die are the African American people in horror movies. One of the best horror movies to come out in the last 10 years, Get Out, a movie that's based on racism. And the civil rights movement was jump-started by the reaction of how white people treated Emmett Till, or in this case, mistreated Emmett Till. When society legislates laws that prohibit kids from understanding your life and what you can accomplish in life and how long you live and how safe you are and what opportunities you can easily access is based on your race. When kids don't have that knowledge, how can they be safe? How can they live life without having knowledge? Knowledge is power. And if Republicans can keep states not teaching the realities of hate, so we can overcome that hate and prejudice and social, legal, and political divides, how are we ever going to become a good country? Our country was built on religious persecution, racism, sexism, homophobia. They shouldn't be American values, but you can't be elected if you don't possess them, or you're good at hiding them. And I hope by the time I die, in hopefully 50 years from now, that these kind of people who support Trump and people like Trump are no longer accepted in society, where we shut down these people's platforms' access to mainstream audiences. People like Weinstein, once you commit certain kinds of misconduct, you're not allowed to represent people anymore. You're not allowed to be someone of influence anymore. Until we get to the point where we don't allow these people to have access to becoming president because of these kind of behaviors, we'll never get ourselves out of this kind of conduct. Because if you don't talk, stand up, and prevent these people from having roles that decide the lives and happiness of other people, outrage doesn't really do much unless you back it up with activity and behavior. And hopefully someday, people like Trump will be immediately dismissed and he'll never have access to power, ever. I hope in 50 years, I hope much sooner. But if by the time I retire and die, if we can have a society that recognizes racism, sexism, homophobia, if we recognize that people who are trying to maintain or gain power have these traits, we immediately cancel their ability to have access for people to even vote for them. Because if 34 felonies and multiple sexual misconduct allegations don't keep someone from even being on a ticket or a nomination, we are a disgusting country.